Welcome into episode 479 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And Bridget and Scott, we're talking today post day one of on-ice sessions during training camp at Warrior Arena.
Yeah, it started. It's underway. Marco Sturm's first practice as Bruins head coach is in the books. Lot to discuss. I know we'll go back to some of the stuff we heard from Don Sweeney on Wednesday as well. That was the day that the Bruins all reported to camp. They were not on the ice, so we can cover some of that. And then obviously a lot of, early takeaways from the first two practice sessions. Bridget and I were in the locker room after talking to a bunch of different players. We talked to McAvoy, Zadorov, Sean Corrali, Tanner Jeannot, Morgan Geekie, Mikey Esamont,
Sean Corrali,
Matej Blumel. Yeah, lot to get to, guys.
Yeah, and Brian, you were there as well. He has his own perch that he likes to choose. So we're up in the media area, which I will say is warm compared to when I went down to visit you.
Yeah.
It's so much colder down there. But what I do like about not being in the media room is you can hear everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could hear Sturm. Sturm was loud to us, and we could even hear through what feels like soundproof glass, but you could hear him even better. So you probably have a pretty good gauge, maybe a slightly better gauge of what the intensity level from him was like, and I think that's part of your opening shift too, right?
It is, yeah. So I'll just kick them off, and I do like to be where you can hear all the acoustics and hear the communication and just the sights and sounds in the rink. So yeah, I always perch myself behind the net there. But so obviously last year, and we've covered this at nauseum, but the training camp was not great. The start to the season wasn't great. Their practices throughout the year were kind of complacent. Certainly, they weren't very intense, and I'm not blaming any one individual. It's just the reality of the situation. But this offseason, much has been discussed about righting those wrongs. You bring in Marco Sturm, and I think we all expected for the last few months that training camp was going to be high intensity, high energy, and quick pace, and that's exactly what this first on-ice session for groups 1 and 2, or A and B, whatever you call them, both were today. And yeah, he's the way I would describe it is that Sturm, there was no honeymoon period. There was no I'm new, so I'm gonna be friendly with everybody. He wasn't a bad cop. He's just, frankly, what's been advertised. He says what's on his mind. He's very sure of himself and the details he's coaching. He's direct. He's to the point. He's loud. But he's not, like I said, he's not a bad cop out there. He's just a very intense guy. And I thought the practice for both sessions indicated that. They started off with high, quick pace warm-up drills, and then went to a center ice team stretch before the start of the rest of the practice. So that's a difference in structure that I noticed right away.
Yeah, I kind of felt so everything was really high pace. They were doing some forechecking drills. They were doing some back-checking drills. They were end-to-end a lot. And I was wondering, in the back of my mind, obviously what he's doing is strategic, and I'm wondering if he was maybe trying to gauge people's endurance, maybe trying to get people up to shape as fast as he could by starting off with such a quick practice, and also probably trying to get a judgment of who the fastest guys are on this team, because something that was talked about by multiple people in the locker rooms after practice today and talked about by the coaching staff was that this is going to be a team that plays fast. That's going to be one of the things that they try to take advantage of. So good to kind of get to know that aspect of your personnel right away.
Yeah, and they did some sprints at the end of practice too, so throwing those right in where, on top of this practice that's already been going at a pretty good pace, now we're also going to throw in some sprints to end it, which Sturm seemed to be having some fun with because he was doing it they're doing it from the side boards, and Sturm would go different distances away, and players had to sprint to him, stop, go back. And so he was going further out, then kind of came back in. And you could tell he was laughing at times during it, so he was having some fun with it. That's exactly what I think we heard in the room after too. Is Sturm is just, there was no gray area. They had team video sessions before practice, and a couple players highlighted that it was very clear what they wanted to do. And like, even beyond, hey, let's just get some pace and energy, there was also a purpose to what they did today. They were working on breakouts, transition, forecheck. Like, that was the theme of today's practice. We've already heard that tomorrow, Friday, is going to be defensive zone work. So there's like a clear area of attention, at least to practice number 1 and then practice number 2 on Friday. And I'm sure that will continue. At some point, it'll be a special teams practice. At some point, it'll be offensive zone cycling. Like, there's going to be different stuff that they're going to focus on. And he's not throwing everything at them at once. So, it seems like by all accounts, it was a good first practice. Charlie McAvoy even highlighted that he liked that Sturm stopped a couple of drills after like 1 or 2 turns through, whereas like pace isn't good enough, or you're not quite getting this right, and would immediately restart it. So good. You would have to say good start, right? Like, it's day 1, let's not go too crazy, but it seems like they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish.
And it felt like there wasn't a minute wasted, right? Like, when I was watching the 2 sessions, I walked away from the rink being like, that was just a good day of practices. Like, it's nothing crazy. It's not us sitting here being like, oh, they're practicing this way, so they're going to be a cup. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what we're inferring here. But it's what it should be. Like, you're a professional hockey team. Like, you're supposed to go to the rink. It's your job. It's supposed to be business. Like, these are all things where it's the baseline for a successful organization, which is good to see. And something else that I enjoyed hearing Zadorov mention after his skate, and this may have been a video you posted, Scott, or maybe Connor, but you can correct me. But he talked about how last year the main NHL roster players were kind of in one room, and the young players were in a separate locker room at Warrior, whereas this year they just separated into Group A's in one room, Group B's in the other, and to me, that kind of reminds me of the culture that the Bruins had before when Chara was the captain, where it was like, you know what, there are no rookies, we're all in the same organization. So I do think it is good for guys that are going to be in Boston to start the year, that they have a personal relationship with guys that are going to be in Providence, because you want the organization as a whole to do well, and you want to be a Boston Bruin, and maybe you see a highlight on Twitter or a newspaper article about the Providence Bruins, and you're like, oh, I'm glad to see that so-and-so is doing well. I got to be him over the summer. So that was good to hear as well.
Yeah, so I think it was probably Connor who posted that. I think I posted a different Zadorov clip, but I am writing something about that, kind of using that story as like a jumping off point for what I'm writing for weei.com. But yeah, like, that was notable because it makes all the sense in the world, and it's like, yeah, why wouldn't they have done that before? But like, I also understand the other side, and I don't know when it changed, because Marco Sturm said like that's what we always did, and he's like, it just doesn't make any sense to me to have it split up. But at some point it did change, because the Bruins, at least the last couple years, it was the other way.
A
where
Monty thing? I
don't know. It because like, you can understand how that happens, right? Because the main locker room is the nicer one. That's where everyone's nameplate is.
Yeah,
like,
all their lockers are already set up.
Better stalls, all that stuff. So you get why, yeah, the veterans would want to be in there instead of the kind of auxiliary room, which is probably more like just a basic locker room, as Marco Sturm called it, the shitty room,
Yep.
which I'm sure Bruins organization was thrilled to hear. But yeah, it's what Zadorov was saying was like, yeah, so last year you'd get on the ice and like you'd be practicing with guys you hadn't even met yet, and like didn't even know what their faces looked like. Well, it's like, yeah, that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, it to me, it's just common sense that you should do it that way. Like, and the way Sturm said it was, Group A is a team. They're going to be in a locker room like a team. Like, Group B is a team. That's how he looks at it. And to me, it's not a story to me, except for the fact that last year's training camp went as poorly as it did and became a storyline. So this year's training camp, finding those differences is something that we take note of. And that's one thing. And we've already listed a few things right off the bat that we think are going well, that we think are good changes that Marco Sturm and just even just the players' mindsets as well.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and Bridget, this can lead into your opening shift, but I will say, like, yesterday I got a little bit nervous because we got the news that David Pastrnak would not be on the ice the first couple days. And not that it's a big deal, but I was like, it's not the best way to start. And, like, you would want him out there to try to, be one of the guys to set a tone, lead by example. Like, you want your best players, your captains or leaders or alternate captains, whatever you want to call them. Like, you want them out there. And so it's just like, could have been a little bit more ideal of a start, but it didn't really seem to impact this practice, and just in terms of that pace and energy that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'll go to my opening shift then. So David Pastrnak, I'm sure people followed yesterday's coverage when we talked to Don Sweeney, probably saw the quote because I think all of us tweeted it immediately when one of the very first questions was like, did everyone pass their physicals? And he was like, well, I was hoping you didn't ask that. David Pastrnak is going to be not going to be practicing. He's going to be skating. We did see him skating today before the Group A got on the ice. But to just quote what Sweeney said, and then I'll follow up with something Sturm said today. He said that Pastrnak in his last training block had gotten a little bit of tendonitis and that it was load management related at this point. Not, both Sturm and Sweeney said he could practice today regularly, but we decided to just give him a little bit of a break. And then one of the reporters asked Sturm today, where was the tendonitis, to be more specific. And he was transparent and he said his knee. So I guess we're at least going to get a little bit maybe more clarity with Sturm in terms of, a lot of times.
At least for now. Let's see if anyone puts the kibosh on
well,
that.
yeah, because he goes, it's his knee. And then he looks, he goes, can I say that? And he's like, you already said it. So it's like a little bit. I think there might be maybe a conversation because a lot of times happens to college coaches. They'll be like totally breaking HIPAA and saying, oh, somebody broke their hand.
I mean, like, HIPAA doesn't really apply to sports in that sense anyways.
Yeah, but no.
But I always think of, we always played as a drop on the station on our shows. Dak Prescott saying, like, I think that's HIPAA.
I think that's HIPAA, yeah.
Like, I forget what he was even asked about.
I guess technically that only applies to healthcare people, right? Like doctors.
Yeah, and like in sports, there is an expectation that like you don't have to go into all the details, but like you do have to report when guys are injured.
Yeah, but
like
usually
you can't just like have a guy like not be at practice or playing in games, and just like tell people like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what's going on. Like, no, you have to. You can be vague and say upper or lower body, but like you have to communicate that there's an injury.
Exactly. It's normally just upper or lower. That's it. Even if it's a concussion, it's like upper body. It's a lot of times people go that route. But anyway, a little bit more specific on Pastrnak, and Sturm mentioned that it did kind of throw off what lines he wanted to put together from the get-go and get a look at in practice on day one. Because he said he works in pairs, so I'm guessing maybe he was thinking of pairing Lindholm and Pastrnak or something like that, or even Geekie and Pastrnak, and then trying to find the third, or maybe just for that line it's different and he knows all three. But
I think it's that. I think he knows that's his top line.
Yeah, and so he mentioned that threw things off a little bit, but the good news is early next week Pastrnak should be practicing normal. Which means he probably will not play in Sunday's first preseason game.
Not.
So don't, if you're looking to get tickets and you want to see Pasta, maybe hold off.
He wouldn't have played in the first one anyways, I don't think.
A lot of the older guys, they will play in the home games normally rather than the road games, but not the first one. So anyhow, he is not expected to miss a lot of time, and I don't think him missing, you say the first 3 or so practices is going to be a huge problem unless
it shouldn't be,
unless there's information that is missing for us right now. But.
Yeah, the only two issues like I could see from it is obviously one, if it lingers beyond that and it turns out to be something that's more annoying and lasts a little longer than they're anticipating right now, that would obviously be concern number one. And then my second concern was what I mentioned was, does not having Pastrnak out there like affect the pace and energy of practice? Are, like, could he help set the tone? Because for years, and like in retrospect, this was a problem that we probably should have recognized. We would hear about how, like, oh, days that Martian missed practice or got like a maintenance day. Sometimes the energy was a little low, and it's like, well, that shouldn't happen. Like, you shouldn't need one guy to lift up the energy. Like, that should be the entire team that brings that. So I was a little just interested to see, like, does not having Pastrnak out there affect things in that way? And didn't, at least for one day, it certainly did not. But I'll go into my opening shift, which, Bridget, you mentioned Marco Sturm talked about what he's thinking when he puts lines together and how he looks for pairs, which is not unusual. Like, we've even talked about that before. You try to find two guys that work, and then you can figure out the third that goes with it. One thing I thought was interesting is while he was discussing that, or it might have been a different answer, but he talked about how he wanted to put Matej Blumel and Pavel Zacha together because he thought that could be a good combination. And that just really stood out to me because it's like, oh, like he's viewing that as a potential pair, at least a start, at least as something he wants to look at. But if that goes well, then it can also carry over into the regular season. And, I've mentioned a couple times, like, just things I've heard over the summer. I think there's people in the organization that really expect Matej Blumel to make this team and think they're giving him the opportunity to show that he deserves the inside track. And today only further confirmed it. Like, Marco Sturm's talking about him as a match with Pavel Zacha. We know Pavel Zacha's in your lineup. He's on one of your top three lines. So if you're looking at Matej Blumel and how he fits with them, like, you're thinking about Matej Blumel as one of your top 9 forwards. So I thought that was notable. Obviously things can change. I think we will see things get changed up and moved around, and different guys will play different games. But, there were, I think, a couple notable combinations. We can certainly get into the D pairs. But yeah, so it was Arvidsson that moved up to that top line with Pastrnak out. I was wondering if maybe he was considering like Mittelstadt and Arvidsson as a potential pair, but they weren't together, so Arvidsson was on that top line. Mittelstadt instead was with kind of a rotation of Husnudinov, Alex Steves, and Joey Abate. So that was kind of like, I thought, a little bit of sort of a random mishmash of a line. Like, I wonder what the exact thinking there is. Like, is that more of a third line combination where Mittelstadt might be a little lower in the lineup than we thought? Fraser Minton was centering Johnny Beecher and Fabian Lysell. I could see that as like, all right, part of that could be a fourth line, like Minton and Beecher, but maybe that's even more of, hey, here's 3 young players with something to prove. Like, let's see you guys make a push. Same thing that was in Group A in the second session. You had Matt Patra centering Riley Tufte and Riley Duran. Like, again, it's like, that feels like, hey, show us you're ready to make a push. Like, we're putting you 3 together. Go out and impress us. The fourth line was exactly what we had speculated about, which was Sean Corrali with Mikey Asimon and Mark Kastelik. So I can definitely see that being at least a start, like what Sturm is thinking for a fourth line. Again, there's a lot of time here over these next few weeks to move things around, and some guys are going to make a push to be higher than they are now. Other guys might not play up to where they are now. But yeah, I did think some of those combinations were interesting.
Yeah, that line felt like a legitimate fourth. Like, that felt like the fourth line more than likely to start out.
Yeah, there weren't, especially with Pastrnak being out today, it did mess things up probably with some line combinations they wanted to start off with. But there were a few combinations that I took stock in, even outside of the Pastrnak thing, which is the fourth line you guys just mentioned. Like, I think Kastelik, Corrali, and Easy, we've talked about it. But that, to me, I think they want that to be their fourth line, and I can see why, because you see them out there and they're big, they're quick, they're purposeful. I think they
forecheck really hard,
and I think they could recognize the moment and more importantly recognize their role. Like, I know that there's people that are high on Johnny Beecher. Well, Johnny Beecher's speed, he'd be nice to have in the fourth line, and I don't disagree with that, right? But I think fourth lines come down to having that identity and what are you doing on a shift to shift basis, because it's not necessarily producing. And do you like? I see AC Mont, Corrali, and Kastelik knowing what their role is out there and being more effective at it than Beecher. Beecher kind of has like this. He has the skating of a top 9 forward, but he has the skill set of like an extra forward. So it's kind of a weird combination. Somewhere else I looked at and said I think there's purpose here was the D pairs, because there's less question there. So the defense pairs between the two sessions were Lori on the left, McAvoy on the right, and then in Group B it was Lindholm on the left, Peak on the right, which I think would be, I'm going out of order from sessions because I think that's their second D pair. Third D pair is Adorov on the left, Jokiharju on the right.
Yes, yeah, that's what they had. So we had talked a little bit about last episode how we didn't really know what Jokiharju would look like next to. We got a small sample size with Zadorov, which it seems like maybe they'll just start with that because that does have a little bit of experience together, and then go Lindholm Peak, which we really haven't seen a lot of either. So yeah, those felt pretty standard. Like, okay, that's probably what he's gonna go with to start. I do want to make sure we touch more on Blumel though, because I feel like this was one of the main things that I came away from today thinking about, because it just made me kind of reconfigure the depth chart a little bit in my head. I don't know if you guys felt like that too, because comments that Sturm made about what kind of a player he was in the AHL, and if we haven't covered Blumel a whole lot, but I know we mentioned it in the middle of the summer at some point that he was the leading goal scorer in the AHL. So this is a guy who has 39 goals and 72 points in 67 games last season, over a point per game average in the AHL, got a few games in the NHL, didn't feel like he got enough games with Dallas. I said it was frustrating when we talked to him today. But Sturm said, of course, being a coach of an AHL team, the Ontario Reign in LA's organization last year, he had seen him and he had to game plan against him. He said he's the kind of guy that in the AHL, he's the guy you worry about. You go through tape. You try to make sure he's covered. And I'll just read the quote from Sturm on him today. He said, he's one of the guys where you had to make sure we're going to cover this guy because he's such a good shooter and scorer, especially on the power play. He says he sets up where Leon Draisaitl likes to hang out. He has that spot, and he was so dangerous. So his scoring at that level is elite, right? He's getting a lot of time on ice. He's getting 20 plus minutes of ice time. Then he comes to the NHL and he's getting 7-8 minutes of ice time. So it's just hard to get in the groove that way. So we'll see. I mean, if there's that already built-in respect from Sturm on what he can be, because he's seen him at that level, and he's pairing him with Zacha, and he's thinking, and he mentioned he's kind of a shoot first guy. He's not gonna defer the way that we were talking about. There's a lot of guys in the top 6 that defer. Maybe he does try to put him and Zacha together, because Zacha's a setup guy. Blumel is a shooter. So I was thinking just the way that the lines were set up today, obviously without Pasta and with Middlestat not on the, not in a second line kind of like combination. Yeah. What if he goes like Blumel, Zacha, Arvidsson, and it's just like 2 shoot first guys and Zacha is a setup guy as a center? We're not sure if he's mostly going to be playing wing or center or what, right, and what they want to do with Middlestat, but maybe Middlestat gets bumped out and it's Zacha centering, something like that.
Yeah. Also worth noting that today, the other wing on that line was Tanner Jeannot. So that's taking a look at Jeannot in kind of a more offensive spot versus a checking line type of role. Like Jeannot was not in that fourth line or, the one of the extra lines. Like he was in a scoring role. And I think we expect like Tanner Jeannot's gonna be in the top 9 to start. I have very real questions about whether that works, because this is a guy who hasn't had more than 17 points in 3 years. So I don't know what you're really going to get there, but that is where he was today.
Yeah, there's this repeated talk about his leadership and why that's important, and why, like, almost a lot of the guys that they brought in, including Arvidsson, it's been talked about that, but I feel like it keeps coming up. oh, Jeannot's a good guy in the room. Jeannot's going to be good for. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you have to be able to play on the ice too. But yes, it matters having that. It matters having locker room presence. And it's funny because even if he does go down to the fourth line at some point, there were times where just in certain non-line rush drills where players were just kind of randomly paired up. Like there was times where I'd see Jeannot and Kastelic out there together, and I'm like, that's a lot of meat on that line. I would not want to be a defenseman with those two out there with like Sean Corralium. That's a big line. But
and Asimon is kind of a pest too.
He is. And so yeah, there's a lot that needs to play out. What I'll say about Blumel is, Bridget, you're right to bring up the fact that Sturm also in the same breath mentioned that he wouldn't be able to do what he does at the AHL level, at the NHL level, if he's not given the proper minutes, because it is about touches and ice time and rhythm and feel. And so it makes sense why the Bruins could sit there and say, well, he's a great AHL scorer, so he'd be a good third or fourth liner for us. And then say, but that doesn't work because that's not what he's accustomed to. So maybe if anything, we'll give him a potential look at top 6 minutes with Zacha. And what I'll say about Blumel is he's out there and he has some swag. He has some confidence. Like you watch him and he looks like somebody who knows that, you know, he's got some good skill. Now whether that translates or not, we'll find out. But there are certain players, and you guys will understand where I'm going with this. It's hard to pinpoint it, but he just kind of has a level of swagger out there about himself.
Yeah, he does, and like we heard it afterwards too when we talked to him in the locker room. We're like, he has a lot of confidence in himself. He was asked if, you know, it was frustrating to not get more NHL opportunity in Dallas, and you know, did he think he deserved it? And like he was like, yeah, like I do think I deserved it. I think I played really well in the AHL, and yes, it was frustrating to not get more NHL time. So it's like, yeah, that's a guy that clearly views himself as an NHLer, even if he has not been that as a regular yet.
And like clearly extremely passionate about making his dream come true in the NHL. Like that seems like an obvious thing to say, but like even in his so he has this really crazy tattoo on his arm. Like he kind of started showing people what some of the stuff was, and he has like
it doesn't say skate pod, does it?
No. He said he's getting that added in the next couple weeks.
Next.
He has to find a place in Boston.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna have to do it on his other arm because this whole arm was covered. But like he has like Texas like in the middle of it, of what was kind of like a tribal like Hawaiian looking tattoo. And it had like a little star in Dallas because that was where he played his first NHL game. So it was like he literally tattooed it on himself, you know, how much that meant to him. And he just seems like he's absolutely not going to go down without a fight this training camp. So and he did seem to have some confidence. His English is great. He's from the Czech Republic. Obviously, like a lot was made of his connection to Pastrnak and Zacha, but
I don't want to derail us too much, Scott, because I know you're in the middle of a thought, but I'm also curious. He must have an outside / pretty good chance of maybe cracking a lineup or a roster spot for the Czech Olympic team, no? Especially if he ends up making the NHL roster.
That's a good question. I mean, he's played for them at Worlds, so like he's obviously on their radar. He has played at the international level. I would have to go through, but I mean, you're probably right because that Czech team, like I remember when looking at it, I don't know, last year, I think looking at it like leading up to 4 Nations of what that team could have been had they been in that tournament. And it does taper off quite a bit towards the bottom of the roster.
Well, I
so
think
like
Lauko would be like in consideration.
Lauko would be on the team for sure, I think. Yeah, so
totally different kinds
you
of
would
players,
have to think like anyone who's, especially if he sticks in the NHL and plays NHL games this year, like that alone puts him on probably a pretty good chance of being on that team. I also want to make sure, like, just so we don't bury this too much, but it's also very notable that Zacha and Mittelstadt were both centers today on different lines, because I think we and a lot of people were thinking, like, well, probably Mittelstadt and Zacha together on your second line and, you know, try to make that work. Maybe Zacha probably bumps over to the wing. Well, I think maybe our first hint that they might do this instead was Fluta Shinzawa had an article in The Athletic a few days ago where he had sat down for like a video session with Marco Sturm, and Sturm was talking about different things about how he wants to play. He was talking about centers and how, you know, they have to play in the D zone, and he kind of ran through the list of centers, and obviously Elias Lindholm, but then he included both Zacha and Middlestat, and then mentioned like Fraser Minton, Sean Corrali. So included this whole list, but it was clear like he was at least thinking about Zacha as a potential center. And then that's where he was day one of practice. Now, Sturm did also say after practice that there's guys who are going to get looks at center and wing. Like he mentioned, Matt Poitras will get that. Poitras was a center today, but he'll get a look at wing at some point as well. So these things can be fluid and still move around, but I do think we probably hadn't talked too much, but might have to start talking about like the possibility that maybe it's whether it's Middlestat 2C, Zacha 3C, or vice versa. Like maybe we're not looking at 3C being Fraser Minton versus Sean Corrali versus Matt Poitras. Like maybe the competitions are more on the wings, and it's Zacha and Middlestat are both centers.
And we did mention late spring, early summer, especially when we're going over some potential off-season acquisitions that they could do. We did talk about the idea of Casey Middlestat potentially being a third-line center for the Bruins, and because that could, you might feel better about the Bruins center depth if he's your third C than your second C. But
I feel certainly like if and there are probably more guys that are in competition for those wingers. Like if you think about Poitras as a winger, you think maybe different guys that are natural centers you could plug in there, and you keep Middlestat in his natural role at center. Like it does feel like there could be more depth if you spread them out, because we talked about this last episode. Outside of the six forwards that are penciled in top six, like the scoring really drops off if you look at last year's statistics, and that's a way to do that a little bit. And maybe so. All right, to kind of bring it back to something I said earlier, where Blumel was matched with Zacha as like a shot first guy, like that he could be a shot first guy on a line, a second or a third line, something like that. Maybe they match Arvidsson with one of those guys. Maybe they match someone like Blumel with one of those guys, and those are the middle stats, and the Zachas are the playmakers, and then they have somebody who's going to be focused on shot volume and getting to the net as the other guys that they put with them. Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating to watch how it all plays out during camp, because right now it is kind of difficult to really get a true pulse. So over the next few weeks, for sure, we'll figure this out. But I do want to quickly go over some of the players that are on the bubble, which it appears that there's many, but get your guys' opinion on who sees the day and who may not have. Now, I'll say this off the hop. Across both sessions, I don't think there was one player that didn't play well. I just think that there were some players that I didn't really notice, and that could just mean that they were keeping up, right? They weren't bad. They were just they're out there, and there were a couple of players that I did notice a few times, and I said, okay, you're showing yourself well here, good for you. I don't think I noticed Matt Poitras too much out there. And again, he was on an interesting line combination. I do think it's worth noting, although it's day one of camp, he was playing with two players that are penciled in for Providence. Now, again, maybe tomorrow and over the weekend he's with Boston Bruins line mates, but we'll see. But it was notable, and in doing so, I don't think he stood out much. I don't think Fraser Minton had a very loud day. I don't think that, I'll leave it there. Johnny Beecher didn't have a loud day.
Kuzi.
I thought Kuzi was one of those guys who was not above the rest, but he was not somebody I'd say didn't have a good. Like I thought he was totally fine. I think honestly, Fabian Lysell was pretty noticeable today.
That's exactly who I was going to go to.
He was throwing his weight around on these forward checking drills that Scott alluded to earlier. I thought Lysell was making an absolute effort to be physical, and I thought Lashmelis was, he was I would say average with everybody else for the most part, but there was one drill in particular down the far end in front of where the Bruins brass stands, and he was it was a down low like 3-on-2 situation, and he was in a battle with McAvoy for about 15 seconds, holding the puck off from him, and eventually into a scoring opportunity. So that right in front of the Bruins brass to see Lashmelis protecting the puck and taking the, making something happen against McAvoy was notable. And somebody else who didn't really do much at all was just out there. To be honest, if I didn't see him in the skating rounds, I wouldn't even notice he was out there at all, was Georgi Merkulov. Didn't really notice him out there much either. So, not to read too much into these things. Again, nobody had a bad day, but I would say Lysell of the bubble guys may have had the best day of all of them.
Yeah, I thought Fabian Lysell made a really good case for himself today. Like you mentioned, like he was getting in there on the forecheck, he was taking the body, and even beyond what he was doing when he was the F1 on the forecheck, the first guy in, when he was F2, he was taking really good angles and just taking the puck cleanly and then setting up someone in the slot. So he looked like a guy who knew exactly where to be, had good stick position, and was just coming away with the puck cleanly. Whereas a lot of times those just lead to tie-ups and then it's kind of a battle, and he was just coming out of it with the puck, which is what you want to see. If he can do that with his speed to get there on time, that's a big step towards him being an effective player at whatever level he's at, but especially in the NHL potentially.
And that's a shoot first guy. I mean, seems like if he can, and he's fast too, right? He fits into the things that they want. If it clicks for him, if he gets it, there's a spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling is, if we're talking these bubble players, right? If we're talking Blumel, Patra, Steves, Minton, Husnadinov, Beach, there's so many of them, right? But Lysell's ceiling is probably higher than all of theirs, if we're talking his ceiling. But his inconsistencies and at times just immaturity, just seizing the moment, has gotten in the way. So if he can be consistent and reach his ceiling, I think his ceiling is probably higher than the guys we mentioned. But if you can't reach your ceiling, then what are you, right? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Even just show improvement, right? Show progress towards fix. Not in his game, it's the all around game. Not necessarily the offensive game for him, because that's what we've seen him do well at.
Well, but it is the offense too, because we've seen him use his speed, but then skate into trouble and not be able to create out of it. So it is also his offense, and that's something where just bigger picture and maybe there's a story to be written about. I just wonder about how he was developed, where there was there's been so much of this emphasis on Lysell's rounding out his game and smart details and defense and all that. And I'm did it almost get lost somewhere of maximizing his offense, maximizing what he actually does well? Because whether it was in Providence or the games he was up here, it's there's times where it looks like he gets going on the attack and then doesn't really know the next thing to do. Doesn't really know how to finish the play into, and I don't just mean finish in terms of scoring. I mean convert a rush out wide into a scoring chance. So I do think there's stuff offensively there that has to be better than it's been in the past too.
He gets indecisive sometimes, where he doesn't know if he wants to shoot or pass, and if you can't figure out what you want to do, because you have the ability to do both, well, the time and space is gone now, and so he has to be more decisive, more direct, more purposeful. I'm getting this puck on net regardless, or I'm passing it right away. And the other thing he has to do too is he needs to not keep plays alive. You cannot be one and done. If you're not just going to go up and down the ice with scoring chances and score or not score, and go, you have to be able to have the ability to extend plays in the offensive zone, and you do so by holding on to pucks, when you don't have anything, right? So those things, certainly I did not, none of us had the ability to see that on display today, right? I'm not saying that those things are there yet. All I'm saying is that in the little time I saw of him today, I thought he definitely he did well in his name today. But there's a lot that we need to see, and the Bruins need to see in game situations throughout camp before he has a spot on this team.
A couple other guys, one positive, one on the quieter side. On the quieter side, I thought Alex Steeves I saw get bumped off the puck a couple times. In my mind, probably a little too easily. Like he's not small. He's 6 feet. I think like 196. So, but where we're talking about like he's kind of in the same boat as Blumel, where he spent a lot of time in the AHL, has put up a lot of points in the AHL, hasn't gotten a lot of NHL opportunity, and whereas like I think today was a good day for Blumel on the ice, yes, but maybe even more importantly, like just in terms of where he's lined up and how Marco Sturm sees him, I thought it was maybe not the best day for Steeves in terms of trying to make a great first impression as he pushes for a roster spot. And then the other guy I thought had a really great day, may very well have been the best player on the ice. It's a little bit of an obvious one, but Morgan Geekie.
Oh yeah, meant to say him too.
Was great today. Like
mid-season form.
Yeah, like he had. They were doing 2-on-2, like in zone drills, and he was shielding off Nikita Zadorov like vintage Charlie Coyle style, like just protecting the puck, holding on, making good passes to set up whoever he was with. Had a couple nice finishes. He roofed one on Swayman from like above the dot. So yeah, I thought it was a really good day for Geekie.
His release is pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Like you watch him out there, and obviously Pastrnak wasn't out there. He's another guy that has a stupid release, obviously world class, but. You watch Geekie over 2 sessions. Now, granted, yeah, half the guys out there are minor leaguers, right? Maybe even more so. But still, it's not. It's the gap between his release and the next best release out there is pretty sizable. So he was somebody who was sharp right away, and you're right to bring him up, Scott.
Yeah, and we talked to him today too. So he's. I'll just say, like, I forgot how calm and like easy he is to talk to. He's really very thoughtful with his answers as well, and gave some pretty good answers about what he worked on, what he wanted to get better at. Said that he was really down on himself in the beginning of last season, and he had he was thanks to some of the players and coaching staff that helped him get out of his funk, because he, like, as we know, he got off to a slower start, and then all of a sudden he turned it into his best season production-wise ever, and it turned into this big contract where now he has a little bit of that safety. So his mindset going into this season, I feel, is probably pretty different than it was last year. He now has that comfortable contract. He said Boston was, as through the 2 seasons being here, it was where he decided he really wanted to be long-term. And now that he knows he's with Pastrnak, probably, like, that makes the most sense. He knows he's a first-line guy. He knows he overcame what other coaches had been trying to pin him into a 4th-line role, and that's not who he is here. Like, he always has had that chip on his shoulder, trying to show people he's not that. He's now accomplished that, so we'll see if the confidence is right where it left off last year with that line playing well.
Because we're talking about Geekie, and you also mentioned release. One of the steps Geekie had in those 2-on-2 drills was to set up a Victor Arvidsson one-timer, again, from like kind of between the dot and the top of the circle. I think he'd gotten a little separation Arvidsson had from Yoki Haru in coverage, and he just ripped, like, not a full one-timer, but like a kind of like a drag snap one-timer into the top corner past Swayman. So that stood out as well. I wouldn't go so far as to say like Arvidsson was amazing or like really jumped off the page, but he did have a couple nice shots.
Well, and if Geekie gets off to a better start than he had last year, and he's spending the whole season or thereabouts with Pastrnak, I don't see any reason why he couldn't or won't eclipse his numbers from last year. And I mean, obviously it's the best that he's done so far, so it's the 1 year sample. But
I mean, his shooting percentage was high, so like the analytics would tell you like shooting percentage tends to level off year to year. So that would be the one argument against it, is like,
but like if
just some of those shots might not go in.
If he had of the first month and a half, 2 months back, like to playing at the level he was, it would, you could logically think he adds
Right.
another 5 or so goals or something.
Right, like maybe he doesn't have the shooting percentage he had last year, but he also doesn't have 5 points until December.
Yeah,
So maybe they just kind of balance each other on it. The one thing I'll say,
Which,
though...
by the way, like, also, we've brought this up before, too, but it also makes you think of, like, what number can David Pastrnak get to if he starts well? Because, like, he was also off this... We talked about it, like, what was it, like a month and a half in? He was on pace for, like, 60-something points.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
He got, obviously, super hot from December on, too.
And the good thing... And I understand when people bring up the caution around don't be too optimistic or too set on Morgan Geekie being what he was last year because of that high shooting percentage. But I will say this, he's also more than just a good shot. Like and Scott referred to holding off Zadorov and making a nice play, and that was an extensive hold off. That was like probably 20 seconds, and he did show the ability to make plays last year too.
I was waiting for Zadorov to like cross check. I was like, if this was a game, Zadorov's probably just cross checking him at some point.
Yeah. So I mean, if Geekie can become not just a great release, but just a legit power forward, we'll take that. Like,
I mean, he's
of
built
course,
like that.
Yeah. But again, like when Boston got him, he wasn't that. He was a player who Sweeney took a chance on. Looked at a player who hadn't been given, probably the right opportunity and fit to succeed in Carolina and Seattle. And in Boston, it's taken some time to get to where he is now as well. And now that he's starting to become that, what I'm saying is maybe now we're starting to see what the ultimate finished product of him is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's a lot of people who will always, point out when Sweeney messes up on an acquisition or identifying someone, but this was obviously one that he got right. Like, knew there was more there, knew there was a fit. Gave in the organization, not just Sweeney, but coaches and everyone gave him that chance to prove it, and he did, and now he's here, obviously on a bigger contract. When they first got him, was it $2 million a year he was on, and he was getting paid like a fourth liner, and then he ends up on your first line.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of Sweeney's best free agent signings, and like now you see how the next contract plays out, right? Because sometimes those two things can be a little different depending on how that goes. Like Charlie Coyle was one of his best trades, and Charlie Coyle the contract Coyle signed was fine. Like I think it was probably a little overpaid, but like not too bad. But like that soured some people where like the years where Coyle maybe was a little quieter, it felt like he was overpaid. But ultimately I think that contract was fine, and I think Morgan Geekie's contract will be fine because I don't think he's going to come like crashing back down to what he was. Like I said, like maybe there's a slight dip here and there, but yeah, I think he's a good player there. I think there's a top 6 NHL forward.
What is he, 26 years old? 27?
Yeah, I think so.
And there's certainly a floor when you're playing with Pastrnak. Like his floor is said to be much higher because he's playing with Pastrnak in terms of point production.
Right. Yeah. It's fair. It's fair. But yeah, I mean, and the reason I ask his age is you can make the argument that Geekie's not in his prime yet. He's approaching his prime, right now. But I mean, when you gain confidence at the NHL level and you start to become that player who's in their prime, and now you're going up against kids that are 6, 7 years younger than you, you start to feel like it's your league and not a league that you're trying to figure out, right? And that's why players, when they're in their primes, that it's the best hockeys of their careers, because they feel like they're at that age where they're not beyond their best years, but they also have a leg up on the younger kids because they're still learning out the league, and you just find that sweet spot. And I think Geekie's approaching that.
What else do we want to get to, guys?
Well, the defense.
Okay.
I mean, Hampus Lindholm being on the ice first time, really seeing him in a high pace situation. I thought he looked good too.
Yeah, I did as well. Yeah, I think that's gonna be really interesting to watch how that develops with him and Andrew Peeke, because it was a small sample of them together last year. Obviously, Hampus Lindholm didn't. I think he played 17 games before his season ended, so didn't get a ton of time with anyone really other than Brandon Carlo. The results weren't great. They were outscored 4-0 when those two were on the ice together. But you can see the thinking of like, all right, Lindholm was good with Carlo, and Peeke is like Carlo light. Like I don't think he's as good as Brandon Carlo, but can play somewhat similarly. So I understand the thinking, but I've thought for a while that like I know Hampus Lindholm's not going to get all the opportunity he got the beginning of that 22-23 season when McAvoy was out and Hampus Lindholm started putting up offensive numbers, way above like his career averages, and ends up finishing fifth in Norris Trophy voting that season. I think led the league in plus minus. Like, you're probably not getting back to that, but that did make me think like you want to try to get Hampus Lindholm in more offensive situations, and I don't know if that happens on a pairing with Andrew Peeke. Like, I don't know if Marco Sturm views that as kind of more of a shutdown pairing, which was why I was maybe thinking Zadorov and Peeke together. But I'm just interested to see how that evolves, how they play together, and most importantly, like how Marco Sturm uses them, because Hampus Lindholm can handle being buried with defensive zone starts. Like, he's played that role. I just don't think you're getting the best Hampus Lindholm you can get when you do that. Like, I would like to see him be used in some more offensive situations.
He's one of, he's a skilled offensive player. I think he's one of the guys on the back end who has probably one of the best senses for when to get pucks on net. I think he knows how to move the puck well in the offensive zone. I think he thinks offensively, but he's also just such a skilled defenseman that, in his own zone. So he can do either. I would like to see him get time on the power play as well. Obviously, that's something we haven't seen what Marco Sturm wants to do yet. That wasn't what was worked on today. Probably won't be worked on tomorrow either, because it seemed like maybe
usually that's like a week 2 of camp thing.
Yeah, and so we'll have to wait for those questions to be answered on what he sees his offensive role in terms of special teams. If he wants to use him for a second unit, what have you, or if he favors Lori. There's still so much to figure out for special teams based off of last year's struggles, but I loved what I saw from Lindholm when McAvoy was out that beginning of that season, and I was very impressed with him then, and I was impressed with him right before he got hurt.
Yeah,
he was doing a great job on the power play. He was one of the few guys who seemed to be generating offense consistently, because there was a real struggle during that month time where Monty was coming to the end of his time in Boston, where it's like, okay, who's gonna actually get this offense going? And Lindholm seemed to take it upon himself. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the deep pair dynamics work there, because Lori McAvoy, which is kind of crazy because Lori's so young, is the most, experienced pair together that they had today. I mean, obviously Lindholm McAvoy would be more so than that if they put them together, but.
So what does this tell you guys about the Bruins' opinion and hopes for Andrew Peeke? Is he somebody that we've been sleeping on a little bit? I mean, he's another one of those players similar to Geekie who age-wise is right there in his prime. And he had a good World Championships in the spring for Team USA. Obviously, he's not somebody who's going to be on the Olympic roster for Team USA, but also he's in a contract year. So do you think, and I'm watching them out there today, and I kind of forgot the size that Peeke has. I mean, Peake's a pretty big boy out there. I mean, he's almost neck and neck with Lindholm, and Lindholm is what, 6'2", 6'3", and then Zadorov does tower over Yoki Haru, but it's kind of one of those situations where you can see that working. And Scott's mentioned that their numbers last year actually weren't even that bad. And so, as it pertains to Andrew Peeke, is he a player that perhaps we have been sleeping on as far as somebody who has a ceiling of maybe a steady low end top 4 defenseman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to see it, because I don't know, personally, just my own opinion, like, I don't feel like I've been sleeping on Andrew Peeke. I just feel like I know what he is. Like, to me, he's just a solid third pairing defenseman. I've never really looked at him as a potential top 4 guy, but I mean, he did play bigger minutes earlier in his career in Columbus before things started to go sideways there. I think he was partners with Zach Werenski at one point. So, like, he's played up in the lineup. He's played with kind of top, upper echelon defensemen. Like, that's not foreign to him. So maybe I am guilty of that. Maybe I've underestimated him. But I've just always seen him more as, like, I at least thought, I don't think there's a big gap between Jokiharju and Peak. I view them similarly in terms of upsides, if not necessarily skill sets. But I did feel like Jokiharju, maybe just because I haven't seen him as much, like, and it's more the unknown. Like, I do think there's a little more upside there, but I don't know. I mean, maybe Peak does work with Lindholm. Like, it would be great for the Bruins, obviously, if that does work out.
Maybe Jokiharju's upside is why they have him with Zadorov to maybe help compensate for, the Lindholm Zadorov drop off a little bit. Maybe it's a balancing act,
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
or a fit thing.
And I also think, like, you're gonna see all three of these. I think where minutes are gonna get stacked up is going to be more in special teams. Like, I think if you roll out pairings like this, they're probably going to play pretty, like, you're going to just roll through them 5-on-5. Like, you're not going to, right? Like, there's no one in this group that you're just going to leave on the bench for 8 minutes.
Right.
So no matter what, like, they're all going to see different situations. They're all going to end up against top lines at some point. So that is not, like, again, if it works, like, you do ultimately need one of Peak or Jokiharju to step up and be at least a steady second pairing defenseman, which is a question mark for both of them. But, like, if that does happen, then this should be a pretty good decor.
Yeah, and that's the top 6 on the Bruins defense is pretty well known. So tinkering with the pairs is probably going to happen here and there, and just day one. So,
I mean, last year we were sitting here talking about how on paper the Bruins defense core was probably a top 5 or 6 in the league, and the only difference here is that you sub out Carlo for Jokiharju. And I mean, the way that
is, in fairness, like a pretty sizable drop off.
Yeah, it is, but to your guys' point, like, the D-core should be good, right? And especially if they have good goaltending and good team defenses around them. But one last question for me. I know, it's only day one. I don't want to focus on too many things off the top, and you guys have had a long day as well. But the David Pastrnak thing.
Take the Marco Sturm approach, right? He just started with a couple things day one.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're definitely covering more than Sturm did, I think.
Oh, yeah. We're talking special teams. There was no special teams talk today.
The David Pastrnak story. I don't want to gloss over it too much, and I also don't want to put too much weight in it. But I was very surprised when I saw the comments yesterday, because the first thing that popped into my head was, you had a fucking 5.5 month off season. How are you not good for day one at camp? And I'm sure a lot of Bruins fans felt the same way. Like, what happened? You've had way too long of a summer for anyone's lickings.
Right, like, Andy's been out there for captain's practices. Like, he came back earlier than usual this year. Usually, like a lot of European guys, he would come back, 4th or 5th day of captain's practices or something. He was there right from the start. And as far as we know, was fine through all of captain's practices. It sounds like this was something they caught when he went in for sort of like their final testing, or I think Sweeney called it his last physical block or whatever, training block, whatever that is. So it seems like it was kind of eve of training camp type of, like, hey, there's a little something here, like, let's play this safe. But yeah, tendonitis is interesting because it's like, from what I understand, it's sort of annoying more than anything. And if it's minor, you can just rest and it might go away.
It's not like a tear. It's just pain, essentially. Yeah. It's mostly like pain and swelling sometimes in, whatever tendon it is that is bothering the person, which to him, I guess, is something in his knee. But, it's pain, which you can play through. Does it indicate that maybe something else is wrong. I don't know, but it could just be. I mean, I don't know how much you guys go to the gym, but sometimes you do something and you're like, okay, this hurts for like a week, and then you're
I guess,
back to being fine.
I mean, that happens when I wake up in the morning.
Okay, that's because you're old, Scott.
I guess that's the question, right? Is tendonitis something that varies in severity? Is it? Is it something that lingers all year? Now I got the cranberry stuck in my head. So, is it? Because
do you have to?
do you have to let it linger? So, because here's the thing. There are Bruins fans out there who, regardless of David Pastrnak is in the lineup or not, they think the Bruins are bound for McKenna category. If this injury is something that kind of pops up all year and at some point sidelines him or leads to something bigger, nothing we talked about today really matters when it comes to anything, because they will be drafting Gavin McKenna if Pasternak's not around.
And the geeky conversation kind of goes out the window. He gotta do
Yeah, I think the way I find myself approaching this is like, I'm going to take them at their word for now, that it's very minor, that he could have practiced today, and that he'll be full go early next week. Now, if we get to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and he's still not on the ice, then I think we can start to be a little more worried, where it's like, all right, you told us it was only a couple of days, and now we're a week into training camp, and we haven't seen David Pastrnak. Like, then you can start to get concerned. So I'm not going to get concerned right now, but yeah, tendonitis is something that can linger, like if it is serious enough. So they're saying it's minor. Seems like the expectation is it's not going to linger or, hold him out. But if we start to see any signs that might be happening, then yeah, let's pull the fire alarm.
Yeah. I mean, when the one player that's missing from training camp is your best player and your potential next captain, there's always going to be something.
Again, after a 6-year off season, for what it felt like. So it's like, how's that even happen?
Yeah.
But all right, guys. Any final talking points?
I'll mention this just because I saw people reacting to it on Twitter. This is not on the ice related, but Sweeney brought up Zdeno Chara potentially getting a new definition, or so potentially a new title, or maybe just more of a defined role, because it was very vaguely.
I think it's like a first definition. Like I don't think Chara's role has really been defined at all to this point. It was just
called like mentorship.
Yeah,
but now it's like gonna have mentoring.
I think I would always make this joke about Mike Eruzione, who's around BU a lot, and does technically have a title with BU. I even forget what it is, but for a long time I've always felt like, yeah, his job is to be Mike Eruzione. Like he's just at stuff to be Mike Eruzione. And I was kind of like, that's kind of how I felt with Chara. It's like, yeah, his job's to be Zdeno Chara.
Yeah.
I mean, like Tuukka Rask and Bergeron, I think as well, but certainly Tuukka Rask. He's been around in an ambassador role. Is that something that they would even bother distinguishing for Chara? Or does that have to be something bigger than just him being a team ambassador?
I think it's slightly more than what.
Yeah, so I think Rask is like more like the business and like partnership side of things. I think he even jokingly defined it once as like, I go to the golf tournaments.
I was just gonna say, like, he golfs with people and talks shop for the Bruins.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Greg Hill as WEI ambassador.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, so I think Chara's is gonna be more involved in like helping with the on ice product, like something related to coaches and players. And
it seems like leadership, almost like mentoring.
And so I think that's what Sweeney means when he says like, there's going to be an announcement coming probably in the next couple of weeks that's going to actually define his title and his role, what he's doing. Speaking
of roles and titles, the Bruins also announced some promotions in-house, one of them being Mcquaid going from player development coordinator to director of player development. And Mcquaid is off the ice seems like the nicest guy. As a Bruin, was a very fierce competitor, obviously part of the 2011 championship team, and so fans, of course, like others on that roster, love him, and he was a fan favorite even among that group, right? Darth Quader, the mullet, everything. So I think Bruins fans love Mcquaid, as they should. there have been some comments to me online with some fans that are like, love Quater, but is this just the boys club being the boys club again? And what are your takes on the movements in house?
I absolutely disagree with that being why he's being promoted and why he's with the organization. Like, as somebody who sees him all the time at college hockey stuff, like, this guy works. This guy, if you ever have like a side conversation with him at one of these college hockey rinks, like, he thinks about everything. Like, he's concerned about so much to do with the Bruins pipeline and identifying players and also just helping them use what skill set they have to get stronger and be better prepared for the NHL. Like, he's somebody who spends so much time on looking for younger guys and working with younger guys, and I think he also has a good personality for it. So I would say he's a great fit, and I'm not surprised he's getting promoted at all.
For the record, I'm glad he did get promoted. All I will say is that, again, for podcast sakes, to play devil's advocate, those traits you mentioned aren't always necessarily uncommon with people in those roles. There are a lot of people that probably work hard, have good personalities. So do you, when people make comments like, well, as an organization, have the Bruins done a good enough job developing players into NHL players? Just, is there anything to that side of the argument from fans?
I mean, there is, but it's tough because when we talk about drafting and developing is the second part of that. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about, like, why don't the Bruins have more blue chip prospects? Well, because they've traded a bunch of first round picks. They've missed on a couple notable picks over the years. But, like, they haven't been picking in those spots where you get a James Higgins. And so Adam Mcquaid in his role can only work with what he's given, right? Like, you can't turn a third round talent into a first liner. Now, you might draft someone in the third round who it turns out has a far higher ceiling than people realized. Like, that happens. And I would note that there's been a couple picks while McQuaid's been here that have probably exceeded where they were drafted. Mason Lohrei would be one, and that is someone that McQuaid worked really hands-on with while he was at Ohio State. Actually, even going back to when he was in the USHL with Green Bay, while he was at Ohio State, and then while he was in Providence. Now, I know everyone's, like, kind of disappointed with what Lohrei did last year, but I would say even just by being an NHL regular now in a second contract,
on your top pairing,
that's
potentially,
like, that's better than you get out of most second round picks. So I do think there's been good development there. I think Matt Poitras is a second round pick who so far has probably exceeded expectations. We'll see where it goes from here. Like, no, do I think Adam Mcquaid is somehow part of the problem of why the Bruins haven't developed a top six forward in a decade? Not really, because I don't think he's been given a top six forward. Like, if you want to say Fabian Lysell hasn't developed enough, like, okay, that's a fair criticism. But I think you also have to look at Fabian Lysell in that picture and ask, like, has the player done enough to maximize their potential? So, listen, Adam McQuaid is not above criticism. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's been the greatest guy to ever do this or anything, but I also don't think it's fair to be like, he doesn't deserve a promotion because the Bruins haven't developed a top six forward in 10 years.
So for all the reasons you highlighted, and for the reasons that you highlighted, Bridget, I'll add some more as to why I think that promoting McQuaid was the right call. He lived his role that he's currently advising on. Adam McQuaid wasn't some top prospect that came into the, a team system and was in the NHL after a year or two. Adam McQuaid was somebody, and I don't have his bio in front of me, so I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe, he was riding buses for 5-6 years before he even cracked the lineup in Boston. And when he did, just worked hard every single time he was on the ice to maintain a role in a third line or a third D pair role that eventually was good enough with him on their third D pair to win a championship. And so And I just think that he was the ultimate pro when he was in Boston. So he understands what players are going through, especially prospects that were not highly touted and have a battle in front of them and a true development journey in front of them. So he lived it. And I think that coaches, teachers, in any profession, when you've lived something, you're not always in a position. Some people know something and have done something, but they aren't good at teaching it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case with Mcquaid. And I do think that if you're going to get through to young kids, I do think you can have the ability to relate to them and be like, hey, I've been there. I've done that. I know it sucks to get sent down after your third training camp. And I promise you, because I lived it, if you work hard and do the right things, you will get there. So I think that all the reasons you guys mentioned, in addition to that, I have no problem with the move. In fact, I'm glad they did it.
One other thing I'll highlight as part of those announcements. So the new player development coordinator, who will now work under Adam Mcquaid, is Ben Smith. And I think there's a chance that turns out to be a very good hire for the Bruins. Now, he just finished his playing career. He was playing overseas in Germany for like 7 years. So he's new to this. So there's going to be stuff for him to learn. And like, there's nothing there experience-wise to be like, oh yeah, he's helped develop this guy. Like, no, he just finished playing himself. But Ben Smith played at BC in the late 2000s. He was on BC's national title teams in 2008 and 2010. He was a captain there. He was a 6th-round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks. He worked his way into NHL games. I think he played like 1 or 2 full seasons at the NHL level before eventually going back to the AHL and then overseas.
He appeared in 237 NHL games.
Yeah, and so like similar to McQuaid, like a guy who had to work at it. Like he didn't get there because of talent. Like he
169th overall pick.
Yeah, like he was a grinder. But so I covered Ben Smith when I was in college, and like I'm not just saying this now. I remember him being one of the smartest college hockey players I've ever talked to. Like you could just tell, like in a couple conversations with him, that like he understands the stuff at a higher level than like just about everyone he's playing with and against. And I remember Jerry York would say things like, talk about how great he was as a captain, but would also say like, you know, he can be a coach someday if he wants. Like he's just one of these guys who gets it and like thinks hockey at a high level. So I know people now who still know Ben and like think very highly of him. So I think, you know, again, he hasn't done this job, so he has to prove himself. But there's a chance that that's going to end up being a really good hire for the Bruins.
You know who I could see that was on the ice today for the Bruins that I could see a potential coaching path in their future beyond playing? And I'm not trying to be funny when I say this. Scott might not like this answer, but I'll give it anyway.
Did he also go to BC? No.
I don't know where he actually played. But Patrick Brown.
Yeah, he was BC. Greg Brown's his uncle, BC's current coach.
Oh, there we go. So yeah.
I totally agree with you. Like, but yeah, whether it's like player development or coaching, like, yeah, Patrick Brown is a really smart guy, and I mean, listen, I don't want to talk too highly of another BC guy, but like
2 in a row for Scott.
Yeah, I know, but
as a BU
I mean,
guy,
like, you guys know Patrick Brown's my guy though. But
yeah, we know.
Yeah, but he's been like the de facto. Well, I think now he even does have the letter, but like he's been the de facto captain and now the actual captain down in Providence, and for good reason. Like
I had that thought today because I'm watching him, and obviously the Bruins have not named a captain. That's not going to be Patrick Brown. But my point is, Patrick Brown is the Providence Bruins captain. And so when I was watching him out there today, the thought dawned on me that a bunch of these guys out here are looking at him right now and be like, that's my captain down in Providence. And, you know, he's banging his stick on the ice, you know, in drills, just, you know, kind of directing people, making sure that they know what they're doing, and he's communicating. And I'm like, this guy just seems like somebody who, whenever he's done playing, is going to be in some sort of development or coaching role because he
Well-
has those intangibles of. I thought I was watching another coach out there. You know what I mean?
Well, like Scott said, his uncle is the head coach at BC, so maybe there's a family pipeline of
there you
coaches
go.
going on.
I didn't even know
there.
those details when I was watching them, but that makes all the sense in the world.
Hey, he could be, you know, on the coaching staff of BC at some point.
I'm
you
sure he
never
will
know.
be, and it won't even be nepotism. I truly, I see that. I'm not trying to be funny. I see those traits in him, and like I
Yep.
said, I thought he was a coach out there in the players' line. It's just the way he was kind of carrying himself. So there's a reason why he's the captain in Providence. I think, you know, especially minor league captains, like they're captains for reasons because they're not the top prospects, right? So they have good character. They go down. They work hard and whatnot.
Yeah, and like it can be a tough role for guys to accept because like when the Bruins first signed Patrick Brown, remember like they were thinking he might be fourth line center or at least have a role in the fourth line. Like he was signed to be in the NHL, and it can be a challenge for guys like as they get past 30 and as they start spending more time in the AHL to accept that like I'm gonna be more of an AHLer now, and this organization wants me to be a leader too, and it's like it takes like you have to balance those things in your brain because Patrick Brown, I'm sure, was not and probably still is not ready to give up on the idea of himself being an NHL regular, and yet like also being able to accept that even if I'm not in the NHL, I have an important role to play in this organization, and like I'm gonna take that seriously and like want to be the captain in Providence and not just sulk and like be like, oh, woe is me, I'm 32 in the AHL or whatever.
Yeah.
And that takes a high level of maturity.
Yeah.
It really does. So didn't think we'd be talking about that to end the podcast, but I think
I think we should end every podcast talking about Patrick Brown. So.
that's probably a signal that we are probably good on content for the rest of the episode.
Okay.
Bridget, how long do we? I don't have because we're in studio. I don't have the timer in front of me.
Like hour 16.
Well, that's pretty
Oh,
standard.
okay, yeah.
Not bad.
That's a short skate pod.
Yeah. So we have on ice Friday, groups A and B, and you guys mentioned probably defensive, detail oriented, drills and whatnot, and then there's practice on. Is Saturday a scrimmage?
So
And then Sunday's preseason, right?
Saturday is weird. I think it's listed as like 3 groups with a scrimmage in the middle or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that's going to look
I
like.
think
'cause
I saw-
that's a new way of listing it.
I think I saw Group A practice, Group A versus Group B scrimmage, Group B practice. Talk about an advantage for Group A. You better win that game. Having a practice before you play. And then there was like a small group of 12 players in Group C, which
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be like, I don't know. Because obviously there's a game Sunday, so maybe that has to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what exactly Marco Sturm has in mind for that.
Alrighty, we'll keep it at the Skate Pod for all of the updates. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.